Hey everybody, I'm Steve. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the 2016 MKZ hybrid again. This time we're going to be doing the driver's side transaxle. I'm trying to hunt down a rubbing noise. I've done both wheel bearings. I've done the passenger side transaxle. I've done the passenger side bearing support and cap. So hopefully this is the last piece that's rotating in the front end outside of the transmission and engine. So this is a pretty straightforward job. I don't know what the dealer gets for it, but I'm sure it's a lot. When I called the dealer just to get the pricing on the transaxle, they wanted $280. I bought this axle, and it's a Motorcraft from Rock Auto for I think $129. I'll put a link down in the description. So yeah, I don't know what the dealer would get for it, but I'm sure it's a pretty penny. This is really something that's really straightforward, and I think most people can do this with some basic tools. So let's get started. All right, before we start, let's go through a detailed list of the tools we're going to need, because there's not many of them. There's only, I think, 5 nuts and bolts we have to take off this entire thing. So to get your wheel off, obviously you'll have to take the lug nuts off. Mine are 19 millimeters. I'm not sure what yours are. Like I said earlier in the intro, mine are aftermarket because I had the swollen lug nut problem. All right, so you get your tire and wheel off, or your wheel off. All right, you get your tire and your wheel off. After that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the tie rod link off, and that's going to be a 21 millimeter. You get that out of the way. That'll give you access to the ABS sensor. That's going to be an 8 millimeter, and I just use a 1/4 inch ratchet for that. All right, after you get the ABS sensor off, you're going to go ahead and you're going to take off the transaxle nut out of the hub, and that's going to be a 32 millimeter. Once you get that off and loose and out of the way, you're going to go ahead and you're going to take your knuckle off of the upper strut, and that's a 24 millimeter. And once you get the nut off, you're going to use this hammer to pound out the bolt. And then from there, that's everything you need, as long as it goes smoothly. Obviously, the first step is to get the wheel off. Again, pretty straightforward. I have some aftermarket lug nuts because Ford and Lincoln had some problems with swelling of their lug nuts. I have a video on that as well, on how to get these things off and some replacements if you have the OEM ones. I will link that up in the description as well, or down in the description. So again, first thing we got to do is pull off the 5 lug nuts. So let's get that done. All right, once we get the wheel off, it's pretty straightforward. We're gonna pull the tie rod off, and we're gonna need a 21 millimeter to pull that off. If you end up spinning this and the nut's spinning, and so is the tie rod end here, this is obviously set up so you can put a wrench on it and hold this while you spin this off. From there, we'll get this off, then we'll get in here and we'll get our ABS sensor off, then we'll pull these off. So let's get the tie rod end off first, and then we'll walk to the next step. Yeah, I got lucky, it just came right off. What I normally do is just pull it out, put the nut back on it so that you don't lose it. All right, once we get the tie rod end off, we're gonna wanna do the ABS sensor. That's a 8 millimeter, and it just comes right out. You just get it backed out. Then this entire sensor just pulls straight out once you get it out. And you just let it hang there. All right, once we get the ABS sensor out, the next step is going to be to pull the axle nut. This is 32 millimeters. And it just comes right off. All right, once we get the axle nut broken off there, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take out the 2 nuts that are holding the knuckle in. These are kind of, these might catch you off guard. So you gotta take the nuts off. The bolts themselves have like a spline in them, so you don't wanna try to back these out from the bolt side. So we'll pull the nuts, and then we'll smack the bolt with a hammer and push them out the other side. All right, once you get the 2 nuts off, we're gonna tap these out with a hammer. Careful you don't smack your ABS sensor and break it. All right, now that we got these knuckles hammered out, or the bolts for them, this is what I'm talking about. See how it's got that spline in it? So if you try to back these out from the bolt side, it's not gonna work. These splines are in the knuckle, and I suspect it's there so it keeps it from spinning when you put the nut on. All right, now that these are out, we should be able to pull the half shaft or the transaxle out of the hub assembly. Okay, now that we got the knuckle unhooked from the strut, the tie rod end off, your ABS sensor out of the way, and your axle nut off, we should be able to twist this so that the axle comes out of the hub. Maybe. There it is. It's out. So pretty straightforward. It comes right out. No reason to take the brake caliper and everything off. I did that on the other side and I learned my lesson. So anyhow, we got this out. This green shim, you want to keep this and pay attention to the way it comes off, because this has to go on the new axle. And from here, we should be able to kind of get this pushed out of the way, and we should be able to give this thing a little jerk, and it should come right out. Now that we got the axle pulled out of the hub assembly, this transaxle, you want to try to get it kind of a straight on shot here. And see, you got a little plunger action, so just get it in there, push it in a little bit, and give it a pull. Just give it a pop, and it comes right out. All right, now we got it pulled out. Just double check, make sure you have the right one, because I had bought one at AutoZone, and it was completely the wrong transaxle. So just make sure you got the right ones. These things all match up, and these match up both sides. And before you put it in on the new one, just make sure nothing's too dirty. You might even take a little bit of, if you have some transaxle oil or transmission fluid, just lube up these bearing surfaces a little bit. You might even be able to steal some of it off of the old transaxle. So basically, this is all going to go back together just like we took it out. We're going to obviously start with this end and just work backwards. So let's take care of that. Splined in, goes in. You got to give it a little rotation so that the splines line up. You can be gentle. You don't want to tear anything up like the seal. I had to fight this a little bit and the camera was in the way, but what I ultimately did was just get this lined up in there good and straight, and just like we took it out, we tap, tap, tap. I just tapped it in, and it slid right in. All right, we'll just put everything back together just like we took it apart. All right, the next step we got to do is we got to get this side of the transaxle into the hub. Don't forget to put your green spacer back in, and make sure you put it in the right way. This is important. And the new ones don't come with it. So we got that back in. Now we'll just wrestle this thing around and right in. You might have to give it a little spin so the splines line up. I just put the nut on hand tight. That way, when I'm putting this back together, it doesn't pull out. All right. The next step is we're going to put the knuckle back together. Remember, the splines and the head of the bolt are facing forward, and they'll go aft or backwards. Just get it lined up and push through. Get your other bolt. Just get it lined up and push through. And we're gonna have to tap these back through just like we had to tap them, out. Now that we got the two bolts holding the knuckle together, let's go ahead and put the nuts on them. We'll run them on. 24 millimeter. From there, we'll go ahead and we'll put our ABS sensor back on. And again, this is going to be 8 millimeter for this bolt. From there, we'll put our control arm back together. And this is going to be a 21 millimeter. And again, when you're putting this together, if the whole stud is spinning, you'll just have to get an open end 21 millimeter wrench And I'm not sure what size the stud is, but you'll just have to get a wrench on top of that. And don't forget, the last piece of this puzzle is going to be your axle nut, and that's 32 millimeters. Just give it a little spin, make sure nothing's binding up. Let's go back through it one more time, make sure we have all our nuts and bolts tight. We have our knuckle bolts on and tight, our tie rod end bolt on and tight. We have our ABS sensor bolt on and tight. We have our transaxle nut on and tight, and that's all we took apart. From here, we'll go ahead and we'll put the wheel back on, and we'll set it down, and we'll see if that fixed our noise problem. All right, they're all tight. Just give it a little spin, make sure it's not bound up. All right, everybody, I hope that helped you out. That's probably an hour job if you've never done it before. Now that I've done it a few times, it took me, last time I did it, took me 16 minutes from the time I started taking the wheel off to the time I was done putting the wheel back on. So it's definitely something you guys can do. My guess is the dealer gets at least a couple hours labor for it. And like I said, a couple $100 for the transaxle. Definitely a DIY project. As long as you got some of the basic tools. You don't need an impact like I have. You can do all that with a 1/2 inch ratchet. I would say double check to make sure you have a 32 millimeter socket. That's bigger than comes in most cases or most kits. But you can buy that individually at a Napa, or you can go to Harbor Freight and you can buy the whole set like I had for like $29, and then you own it, and then you never have to worry about it again. So if you guys like what you saw, hit the thumbs up. I would ask that you subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything and it helps me out. And we'll see you on the next one.